people might say, oh, housing market's going to bottom out, say, in the summer of 26. But if you spend X amount of dollars in rent, there's a big potential that you're actually going to lose out because you're spending more on rent. I'm so excited for this particular episode with Julie, who is my guest today. We're going to talk about, actually, it's two topics, right? It kind of reads like one, but it's two. It's should I rent or should I buy? And or whether or not I should pay off my mortgage. So these are, again, it's two different angles, so we'll try and not mingle up the two. But the idea here is to help those folks that are maybe first-time home buyers, maybe their second home, right? And now they're looking at their mortgage potentially, and they're saying, should I pay it off? And so we're going to kind of drill into this today. And obviously, every situation is different, right? But there are some factors that we should consider, right, when we're considering whether renting or buying or, of course, paying off our mortgage. So there's no better person than Julie to join us here today on this topic. Julie, welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
I appreciate the invite. I'm very excited to speak about these two topics.
Good. It's going to be fun.
Okay.
Okay, it's going to be fun, I promise. So I'm going to start. We always like to kind of lay the foundation, the landscape.
Okay.
And I think this is a pretty basic question for you, but the idea behind this one is simple. Why is it more complex now, this decision between renting versus buying? We'll start with renting versus buying before we go into the mortgage payoff.
Okay,
but
sounds
why
good.
is it more complicated today than it was, say, a couple decades ago?
Well, a couple of decades ago, retirement only lasted 10 to 15 years. Now people are living much longer. You've got home prices going through the roof. You've got mortgage rates double what they were just from a few years ago and much higher than they have been the last couple of decades. So where home buying used to be a milestone for people, now it's kind of like a lifestyle choice with a lot of different considerations.
Oh, I like that a lot. I never even thought about that. It's like a lifestyle choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it used to be, I don't want to date myself, 60s, 70s, whatever, that to your point, it was a milestone, but it was really the driver of your retirement too, right? It was your largest asset that you paid off over time, and that became a bit of a nest egg, right? Somewhere you can live for free, right? Paid off. But now it's lifestyle. That's
Right.
really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's for retirees, sometimes they want flexibility to rent so they can live closer to family. I know a lot of my clients like to be seasonal. So why own two separate homes with all the costs of maintenance and taxes? So they prefer to rent instead. For younger people, they also want the mobility as well to be able to move if they change jobs. And so there are a lot of different factors.
So you brought up lifestyle and values, right? And when you're making these decisions, it's not just math anymore. But tell me more about the math. Let's just kind of just generally speaking,
Sure.
the math comparisons of renting versus buying.
Sure. Okay, well, the very basic is how much is your mortgage versus how much is your rent. Then you have to add in what your HOA fees are going to be to own a house, what your property taxes are going to be, what your maintenance costs are going to be. So it's just straight out which one is more expensive. Plus, you have the idea that your home could appreciate in value. And your rent could also inflate as well, too. So that's definitely a financial consideration. So those are going to be the two biggest ones.
And then when I think about, so you brought up some really good points, right? So if you buy a home, it's not just the mortgage, right? It's the taxes on the home. It's the HOA if you're in a community, right? It is the maintenance costs. And then not only the ongoing maintenance costs like landscaping, but there's also the costs around maintaining the home, putting on a new roof, what have you. So an argument can be made that it used to be the American dream to own a home because you'd be able to, over time, appreciate that asset and then have that lump sum, if you will, at the end. Now, you can look at it more like, well, what if I rented, reduced all those variable costs, maintenance, taxes, HOA fees, and put that into the market, there's a chance that, and I'm not saying like, I'm not giving you like a financial plan here, but there's a chance that renting and stowing away cash in a portfolio might be more advantageous than buying a home.
So you obviously could free up all that cash flow by renting and putting it into the market, but that's a huge risk. It's almost like when people call me asking to take out should they take out a home equity line of credit to invest in the market? So that's definitely a different idea. But really renting is just about freedom from maintenance costs. It's about freedom from being locked down to any one area. But it's also, unfortunate that if you rent, you're not going to accumulate that equity. And so because there's longevity, people are living much longer. It may benefit you if you believe you're going to stay in the same place for an extended period of time to purchase. But now it's just so different because home prices are so much higher than they were. I was lucky enough to be able to buy, a couple of houses 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you're in good shape. But now I read a stat that in 40% of the cities in the United States, it's cheaper to rent than to own a home. So like you said, no one size fits all. You have to really consider the costs, how long you're going to be in that area, and really your comfort level of owning a home or renting instead.
That's very helpful. And I get that there's totally risks involved. And so it does boil down to a bit of comfort and lifestyle, right? On the topic of comfort, let's shift gears just a little bit and talking about paying off a mortgage early, right? So let's talk about someone who has purchased a home and they've kind of made, they've made a certain amount of payments or whatever it is, years or what have you. And they either have a lump sum of cash or they have a nice cash balance where they want to pay it off. What considerations should they make before paying off early?
Sure. Well, the biggest one is what your mortgage interest rate is. That's always the first go-to. If it's 4% or less, it would be hard for me to recommend paying down the mortgage because hopefully you could get at least 5% on a 60-40 balanced portfolio over an extended period of time. So that's one consideration. Another smaller consideration would be whether you itemized on your taxes or not. Not as many people itemize these days as they used to because the standard deductions have gone up so much. And now with the new legislation, standard deductions have gone up even more.
Sure.
So whether it helps you with taxes is another consideration of whether to pay down the mortgage or not. You also want to consider emotions. It's not just a financial situation, it's an emotional situation as well. If you're about to enter retirement, some people just feel comfortable not having the debt. They want to free up their cash flow. On average, they can free up 30% of their retirement cash flow by paying off their mortgage, but they just have to be very, very careful not to deplete all their savings. Doing that, they always have to make sure and leave a cushion.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. You mentioned investment returns versus the interest rate.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, staring at debt, and some people are just less comfortable. Like for myself personally, I'd rather get rid of that debt, even though it might not be the wisest from a financial perspective. But then again, my question was going to be to you, liquidity, right? Around if you were to pay something off, like a large chunk and exhaust either a savings account or a retirement account or whatever to pay that off, then you look at liquidity as a potential issue.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, once you put that dollar into the house, it's going to be very difficult to get it back out again. And I definitely would not use retirement assets in order to pay down a mortgage. There is a happy medium. There's a pretty neat trick, though, where if you pay your mortgage every 2 weeks instead of once a month, you could actually reduce the length of time to pay off the mortgage. For a 30-year mortgage, if you pay a payment every 2 weeks, you can drop it from 30 years down to 25 or 26 years.
I love that secret. I'm doing that myself.
Okay, great.
It's it's come in handy because it just see the note going away quicker, which feels good.
Right. It
Right?
definitely does. Yeah.
So let's shift back now. We're going to keep going back and forth. Let's go back to rent versus buy. What considerations should folks have other than just, okay, I'll put myself as an example. I'll give you as my example. I'm moving to Florida, right?
Okay.
We're moving to Florida soon, and so aside from market conditions, well, I guess it's always gonna be related, right? Home values, people would argue, are inflated.
Mm-hmm.
Interest rates are very high.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the two largest decision makers that should drive whether or not you rent versus buy in a market like this? Or are there others we should consider?
Another big one is how long you think you're going to be living in that house. So there's a stat from Zillow that says 6 years is the break-even point for buying over renting due to all the upfront costs and the closing cost of the mortgage. So if you're going to be around 7, 8, 9 years, it might make more sense to buy rather than rent.
Oh, that's very helpful. And for us, in our particular situation, we're watching home values kind of drop. So we're looking at potentially temporarily renting as an alternative, right? Where, yeah, there's some cost to moving a handful of times and maybe not having our forever home when we come
Right.
down here. But we're trying to do that math now too. Maybe you can help me
Okay.
after the podcast is over, because we're trying to do the math on if we were to rent, say, for 6 to 12 months, what is that output, right? Total rent out the door.
Exactly.
Versus how much the market's going to go down, right?
Right.
That's the math that I'm trying to figure out, is because people might say, oh, housing market's going to bottom out, say, in the summer of 26. But if you spend X amount of dollars in rent, there's a big potential that you're actually going to lose out because you're spending more on rent. Is that good logic?
I mean, I think it would be more of a factor if you didn't know the area that you wanted to live in.
Okay.
I'm more, and it's personality. I don't think I would want to drop $70,000 in rent unless I wasn't sure where I wanted to live. If I was absolutely sure the neighborhood I wanted to live in, I would just go for it and just buy. If I knew I was going to be around for a while, I knew what neighborhood I wanted to be in, there's no reason to run the risk of moving all of your stuff into a rental and then moving all of it back in the slightest chance that the market value will drop by more than what you paid in rent.
I like that. It's more complex. It boils down to, it's not always dollars and cents, right? Sometimes it's also lifestyle, making sure you're in the right property. So it's a multivariate decision,
right?
If you will.
And a lot of it is personality too.
Sure.
I hate moving.
The two least favorite things is, for me, it's moving and painting, and usually those come together. So, all right. So real quick, let's fast forward now to like close to retirement. And you'd already kind of mentioned this, but I really want to punctuate this. Going into retirement, is it really important to be debt free? No. Okay.
No, it's okay to have a mortgage going into retirement. Again, especially if you itemize on your taxes. And it's not just about, for people going into retirement, it's not necessarily renting a house. They could possibly move into a continuing care retirement community, or a CCRC is another great option for retirees. So I know it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's
Right.
not, right?
Right. Right. It's not the same, but to answer your question, it is not a bad thing for retirees to carry a little bit of mortgage.
Okay. And then again, I realize you don't know everyone's financial picture, if you will. But are there situations where it makes sense to rent in retirement, right? To sell the home, maybe to downsize into a rental property. Again, it's all those factors, right? The financial factors, but also the lifestyle factors. You have a lot of that in play too. When does it make sense for the retiree to rent?
Well, if they want to be closer to family, if they want to be seasonal and don't want to be tied down to any one place or any two places and assume all the costs associated with that. If they want to live closer to better health care, it just gives them flexibility to see the country, see different places. And it just really depends on whether they have the financial capacity to do that. They can free up the equity in their house, So, I mean, if they're empty nesters and they're going into retirement, they could pull out $200,000 to $500,000 of equity out of their house. Sure, turn that into, a lifestyle of traveling to different places, renting 6 months here, 6 months there.
Sure.
I see that a lot.
Sure. That makes sense. I'm going to throw a curveball at you.
Okay.
This wasn't in the show flow notes.
Okay.
Okay. I think you can answer this one, though, as a financial advisor.
I appreciate your confidence.
Do you recommend that these types of decisions should be brought to a financial advisor, right? I feel like for the longest time, buying a home or choosing to rent versus buy or paying off a mortgage, people made those independently of an advisor. They didn't really consult their advisor. Is that something we should be kind of thinking against?
No. I always think it's a great idea to bounce ideas off of friends, family, and your advisors. It's just a second pair of eyes looking at a situation. Advisors have access to tools that they can use, simulations they can run, different scenarios of costs of renting versus freeing up equity. So there's a lot of benefits to running it by your advisor. Your advisor should really know your personality, should know what kind of questions to ask in order to help guide you to make the right decision for yourself.
That's helpful. I might get more advice from you soon.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Julie. Before we end, though.
Okay.
All right. So I think you picked this up already. So Dime After Dime, it's kind of targeted towards those folks that have found some financial success. They've done all the blocking and tackling, and they're now 10 and 20 years from retirement. So we think these folks are typically Gen Xers, right? Late millennials. And so there's a bit of an 80s vibe here. And this last question is what we're calling back to the future.
Okay.
I want Julie to think back to a time in her life where if you can go back and stop your younger self from making a financial mistake, a bad decision, or making a positive one, like what would you do? What would you tell younger Julie?
I'm a big believer in not divesting real estate if you absolutely don't have to, for a couple of reasons. And that's exactly what I did back in 2015. I sold a house that in hindsight, I didn't need to sell. I don't even want to look and see what the value of it right now is. I'd be halfway to having it paid off by now if I kept it. And this is advice that I share with a lot of my clients, a lot of my friends. Real estate is a great diversifier against your stock portfolio, which the next 10 years could look very different than the last 10 years. Provides a great source of retirement income where, some people are worried that Social Security is not going to be there. Most people don't get pensions anymore. So if I could change one thing, it would have been to keep that house in Tanglewood.
That's interesting. I like that. No, it's a good one. And it ties into the episode. So I'm happy about that too. Wow. Thank you so much, Julie.
No problem. It was all my pleasure, Tony.
If people want to learn more about you, they go to LinkedIn, they visit our website. Are you on TikTok?
No,
don't answer that. Don't answer that. Don't answer that. All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. If you like this episode, make sure you like it, of course, add a comment, subscribe to our channel, but most importantly, share it with your family and friends. We want to spread the message wide, in this case, about renting versus buying and or paying off your mortgage early. Thank you so much. I'm Tony, the host of Dime After Dime. Until next time.